Welcome to Facility Files. My name is Elizabeth Ignatowicz. Yes, that's a mouthful. Try typing that a million times a day. I am a seasoned facility manager, and I currently have my FMP, which is a credential through the International Facility Management Association. And today our guest is Dallas, who also has an FMP through IFMA. And Dallas, forgive me, I don't know how to say your last name. So I will let you introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Dallas Schwerin. I am the Director of Facilities here at Trinity Episcopal School in Uptown Charlotte. Very similar to Elizabeth, I have my FMP. As she mentioned, I've been a longtime member of IFMA. I'm very much looking forward to this podcast and future podcasts. And you know what, just to keep it kind of light and hearty here, we are starting 17 minutes late. That's courtesy of me. I am an FM. Of course, I'm going to be late for our established meetings. It seems to be running in the family.
Of course. And we are FM, so of course we are going to track our KPIs like a hawk, which is our topic today. But before we get started on our topic, I just wanted to give the mission of this podcast. For Facility Files, my vision is to provide practical application to facility managers with real life experiences sprinkled in with some humor. We're going to have fun with it, but I wholeheartedly believe in this statement, and this is not political in any kind of way, but it was made by a political person. But the statement is, when you have worked hard and done well and walked through that doorway of opportunity, you do not slam that door shut behind you. You reach back and give other folks the same chance that helped you succeed. Michelle Obama. So that is my mission with this podcast. And we will start off with our topic, KPIs today. So what is a KPI? And do you want to mansplain it, Dallas?
We talked about this last night. So a KPI is a key performance indicator. It is generally used to track performance of a department, of a division, of an entity, comparing that to established baselines, established metrics. All KPIs are metrics, but not all metrics are KPIs. I'm sure we'll get into more discussion related around that, about how a school does it, about how a corporate world does it with Elizabeth. But that, in a nutshell, is what a KPI is and does. It maintains a service level agreement, an SLA, which is another topic I'm sure the Facility Files will be engaging with and discussing maybe at a future podcast.
So I will take it a notch further down. It's just the that you're going to track.
And hopefully report up to your superiors, because that will tell them, hey, I really need to pay this guy or gal more money for them being in this director of facilities position, or an FM position, AFM position, in whatever position that you're in. And really, it's taken out of, it can be applicable to any industry. It's not only facilities, but of course we here are facilities nerds. Of course, I'm going to check your baseboards.
Yes. So how do you find your KPIs? I'll tell how I find mine. You know, I'm in more of a corporate setting, and while I'm not going to discuss who I work for or anything like that, I've worked for a variety of companies through property management and facility management, but more in a corporate setting and a virtual setting over the past couple of years versus an on-site, whereas you've been on-site. I have contracts with clients, and that's where I typically start and look for KPIs if it's spelled out in the contract. And then if I still have questions or I want to further pursue something different, I'm going to talk to the stakeholders. What are you looking to track? What interests you about what I do? And that's where I start. And then I'll even talk with my superiors. What are you interested in me tracking? So that's how I find mine. How are you finding yours in an on-site role?
So I've been here at the school for going on 2 years, and honestly, that is an area of improvement for the entire facilities department here at this school. It's not something that we have tracked before, so this is a very new territory for the school. However, it's not new territory for me. I come very similar from a corporate facilities background. I've been in-house facilities. I've been outsourced facilities dedicated to a certain client account. Especially in that third-party world, we tracked and maintained our KPIs on an ongoing basis and then reported those generally through what's called a QBR, quarterly business review, or some variants of a QBR. In those QBRs, that's where we looked at all of our metrics that we were recording. You can only, you can only validate what you measure, and then you can only measure, you should only measure what's absolutely important. Bringing in a boatload of data is not necessarily the best way about tracking any of the metrics, which ultimately roll up into those KPIs.
Keep it simple.
So to summarize it back down, we here at the school, we have not tracked KPIs in the past. However, moving forward, especially if I can bring in outsourced janitorial, or rather, let me talk about one of my vendors that I currently have on site, and that's my mechanical vendors. Okay. So one of those metrics that we could track would be equipment downtime. Mm-hmm. That rolls into the KPI of, really, that key performance indicator would be overall system performance. Immediately and directly impacting the overall system performance could be that system downtime, could be the loss of operation if you're in a production sort of a facility. So again, to look at it from the school, we are creating that foundation for what our KPIs will look like.
And KPI to add to that with your downtime, you can understand the why as to what is causing that downtime. Is it that you're having to outsource further for a part, or is it knowledge-based? And you can kind of fine tune that. And of course, our favorite excuse from everybody right now is supply chain issues. But that is a great thing to track. Absolutely. Downtime.
Mm-hmm. So it's a very exciting time, honestly, for me, because I get to bring in all of this knowledge from the corporate world, from that corporate sector, and bring it over into the educational, into this nonprofit world. And ultimately, where I was going just a second ago was KPIs can be used internally. Internally within my team. How well am I servicing? I am a Trinity employee just as much as our faculty members who teach the students. However, the faculty members are also my customer. So how well am I serving my customer? It's not only the teachers, but also the students. So some of our
How would you track that?
We may be looking at ways of tracking how many bathrooms are available, how clean the individual classrooms are, what sort of technologies exist in those classrooms, and then how do those technologies tie into the overall mission of the school? But then coming back down this way, and similar to the HVAC example, the mechanical examples, what's the downtime of that? Because that will be a direct impact on the student life, that student-facing sort of side of it. Yeah. And so if I have a chiller that goes down, now that's a bad news, because we will have to evacuate and send all of the students home, which in my world is never a good thing. Very similar again to the production facilities. If you have a manufacturing line go down, that's loss of revenue. This may not be loss of revenue by sending the kids home. However, it is certainly a potential reputation loss or other impactful event.
Absolutely. So are you doing any type of customer service satisfaction type, speaking with the other faculty on like ratings or anything like that?
We are actually going to be pushing out our very first survey about how the facilities team supports you. How can we be doing better? Where are we falling behind? That will ultimately create my service level agreement, which will then roll directly into a key performance indicator, my SLA. And we in FM, we love our acronyms, right? Even FM is an acronym. So those service level agreements will directly be the foundation for my KPIs. That will absolutely go directly into that.
Those are definitely the drivers.
Exactly. How fast am I responding to a work order when it is submitted? How does that work ticket? And I hate to be so focused on tickets because that seems very transactional, but ultimately that provides the data set that I need when I go up to my CFO, say, hey, Mr. CFO, I need a dedicated building engineer here, and this proves out why.
Yeah.
Maybe not related to KPIs, but it does go into the foundation of what a key performance indicator could be. And
Yeah.
that one of those could be the what is our work order system look like? How well are we managing those work orders? The
Right.
complete versus in queue versus in progress. And what's the timeline there? How well are we hitting those defined SLAs, those defined service level agreements? And if we are hitting, let's say 90%, then that means that indicator, we would essentially be, to use a grade scale, because we're in a school here, we would essentially be at a 90%. So that's an A. I would consider that a job very well done.
Well, 90% is kind of the industry standard for an SLA in FM world. I know with some clients, there are some struggles with meeting that 90% when you're outsourcing to third parties a lot. And it has become an issue, I would say, since COVID, more so with supply chain issues and issues with staffing. How do you think that can be combated or overcome? I know there were times where I was struggling to meet a 90% SLA with a third party vendor, and I worked directly with them, gave them some coaching on how we could better communicate to extend those. But is there anything else or any creative ways that you can think of that if someone's not meeting their SLAs, what are some things that they need to be looking into?
I think you hit the nail on the head there with communication. Honestly, open, upfront, honest, transparent communication.
Yeah.
So when I started, I had a previous vendor in servicing my mechanical systems. And even though I did not have those defined SLAs, which ultimately would have helped make my case stronger to end up cutting them off, moving in a different direction for this past fiscal year for us, that open dialogue, the open, transparent, honest communication about why is this taking so long to get a part in, to come up with a solution. I know that my vendors are experts in their field.
Yes.
However, even experts in their field may take some time. They don't know everything, right? They may have to go back, do some research, do some digging. Ultimately, we want a partner. All FM is a group of partners together working towards a common goal with a single driver, and that would generally be your account manager or your director of facilities, or you, Elizabeth, being in that driver's seat.
Mm-hmm.
I would really say open, honest, upfront communication, because that could lead into, look, if we have a back ordered part, let's say a chiller is out for 15 months, obviously that will blow any sort of an established SLA out of the water. However, if we have that upfront, honest, open, transparent communication, we can then drive that forward and upward to our leadership saying, I know we did not hit this defined SLA. However, we put a plan in place as quickly and as efficiently as we could to limit the amount of downtime that we have. Now, that may mean multiple different things. You may have to bring in maybe some temporary equipment, some other things like that. You may have to build in redundancy in that plan. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have provided a solution within that defined SLA. Therefore, I really liken back to the communication, and you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, I have always been, I harp a lot on communication. I want you to over communicate to me so that I know exactly what's going on with my buildings at all times. I would rather you give me a long story than not give me enough information. That's communication,
Exactly.
Some other things that I have tracked just in the past, of course, we have budgets. So we're going to track all spend, track your cost savings And for those of you that don't know what a cost saving is, it's typically when you get multiple bids on something, you review who has the best cost. And let's just say Jim Bob down the street charged or quoted me $1,000 for this job. Susie charged or quoted $3,000. So there, if I go with Jim Bob, that's a $2,000 cost savings or cost avoidance. I am the cost savings queen just because I love a good cost savings, but also that you can get it through just negotiations of costs. I typically have time and material type contracts with vendors through where I'm at. And there's times where people aren't honest, and you can catch them. You can ask them a variety of questions just to make sure that everyone is being a proper partner to one another. We all are here to make money. We're all here to make the building work. And I love just asking questions like, hey, I do require that all of my vendors, if they're quoting a part, I want to know what part that is, the serial number, model number, all of that. And I'm going to go Google it. I'm going to make sure that you're not charging me $1,000 for a $20 part. Unfortunately, there are service providers out there that have done it before. Not everyone's bad. And sometimes, you have a bad moment. So that's for me. I am the cost savings queen because I will Google every single part. And I just want to make sure that we're all being honest, that I'm going to have to explain to my client why I approved $1,000 part for $20 if that were to happen. So those are some things that I've tracked. And
I'm glad that you brought up cost savings, because that would be more of a metric that rolls into the overall KPI of how are you aligning with your budget.
right.
So cost savings would immediately impact that variance. The variance is the difference between your budget and your actual, right? Positive or negative. Cost savings would obviously bring in some positive impact there, but cost savings and the overall price per invoice and what you pay, that would be a metric that is absolutely directly involved with the KPI of how well are you managing your budget? What does that fiscal responsibility look like?
Right. So I've had some contracts where a cost savings is its own KPI line. Like I expect you to provide a certain number of cost savings per year. And so yeah, it falls into the budget, but then it can also be a separate line too, just depending on your situation and contracts, the expectations. I've seen it both ways. Now you have some great sustainability initiatives that you're working on. How are you tracking sustainability to make sure that talk about your sustainability goal and how are you tracking that and what kind of KPIs are you looking at putting in place for that?
So it's in its infancy as well. I would say the sustainable initiatives are more in their infancy than the KPI. So I would say our KPIs are probably in the toddler stage. Again, looking at it from a school lens here. My solar initiative, so immediately what my board has asked me to look into would be the installation of solar up on our roof. We've got a really perfect roof in its current condition. It's a copper standing seam metal roof, and I'm very hesitant to. It's 23 years old, so I've got out 50, 60 years on its total lifetime. I'm very hesitant to touch that. However, my new building would be a perfect opportunity to introduce solar and look at that. Another initiative that they're looking at is the installation of electronic vehicle or EV charging stations. I am immediately when I got here, we have, you can't see it, but just above me here, and of course I'm an FM, I look up at how many light bulbs are missing?
Right? Oh yeah.
So I'm actually looking up at one right now. Anyway, one of my sustainable initiatives, and this was not directed or mandated in any sort of a way, but it's just in the mindset of a facility manager. I've got to get away from my fluorescent tubes and go to a more sustainable option for lighting. That not only creates the sustainable side, but it immediately and directly impacts the learning environment by providing a stable lighting source for the students within the classrooms or outside of the classrooms in our hallways and corridors.
Okay.
Those are some of those that I'm looking at. We are tracking all of our energy usage. We have natural gas boilers. I've got City of Charlotte Water. I've got Duke Energy as my utility provider. We're tracking all of those energy usages. I would love to get to some point in the near future. It's probably going to be a 2 to 3 year long process to bring in indoor air quality monitoring and then tie that into my energy usage to overall create a dashboard that I can then roll up to my head of school, to my senior administrative team, to which I'm a member of, and my CFO is a part of that, but also broadcast that upward to our board of trustees and then outward as potentially a marketing tool for the school that we can put on our website. You know, we are a very sustainable school. This is what we're looking at doing. So that's more on the energy side of things, but I'm very happy that you asked me about the overall sustainable side of it, because again, we are a school. So I've got a cafeteria here where we are really driving forward more of the circular economy. And I would love it.
Every time someone talks about it, it's super interesting. So what is the circular economy?
Ultimately, let's take a look at this pen, right? So this pen has essentially one useful life. It is manufactured from the raw materials or potentially recycled materials, recycled plastics, which creates a circle right there within that plastic.
Okay.
But what happens after this pen gets to the end of its useful life? Can you take it and break it up? And this is a pen, right? Very small example.
Yeah.
However, if we look at larger examples, so let's take our food, for instance. So food be composted, put back into the earth to grow vegetables that are then used to feed, and then that creates a circle in itself. So essentially, and to dumb down the circular economy, what that does is make what previously was a straight line. You have production, use, and then disposal, with a couple of others maybe mixed in there, to create a circle out of it. So now you go from production to use to disposal, but from the disposal, all of those go back into raw production or new production of new things, maybe repurposing. So it's the recycle triangle, right? Reduce, reuse, recycle. It's that maybe exaggerated just a little bit.
Okay. So how are y'all doing that with the cafeteria? Is it just through food, or are you doing it with materials as well?
We are trying our hardest to. I've got a little over 400 students here at Trinity Episcopal School. It is very difficult to manage that, particularly in our lunchroom, because we have so many students coming in and out. But ultimately, it starts with buy-in. It starts with buy-in from the stakeholders. And at the very beginning of the call, I mentioned that my stakeholders are students. That's my primary stakeholder. However, I have adults that work here. So it's education to all of the stakeholders. It's buy-in from leadership. It could be more communication and marketing awareness around what those initiatives are. But ultimately, it's just constantly beating the drum on this is what our sustainable goal is. This is how we will get to that goal. And we can't get to that goal without all of us rowing in the same direction, not the right direction, but the same direction.
So would you track it by like tracking the trash that you're creating as it lowers? What are some other ways that you might be tracking that?
Typically by weight, especially with food compost. So one of the avenues that we're looking at maybe partnering with would be Crowntown Compost or part of Envision Charlotte over at the Innovation Barn. One thing that we're looking at doing is bringing in aquaponics into our school environment, creating not only a curriculum designed around it to further enhance and provide more of that communication there from the student side. Like if they see this in real action,
it's a buy-in.
They're likely going to have the buy-in, exactly right, to participate in a program like that. So then they wouldn't be throwing away their plastic forks in our compost bin. They would truly be separating out, this is all my food goes here, my plastics go here, which will go directly over into our recycle bin. that is then handled offsite and sorted and done everything with that, and then reused in the production of new materials or in reuse of those materials in other fashions. That's how we're doing it, but it all starts with baby steps.
Absolutely. I am newer to sustainability. We've talked about this. I'm working on getting my SFP, which remind me, what does that stand? Sustainability Facility Professional?
Facility professional, and I too am trying to go for that. You may beat me to it, so I look forward to learning.
We will see. It is self-paced. We'll see. I'm on chapter 1. I'm learning how to calculate my carbon footprint right now, which is really interesting. And that's a KPI in itself that I'm going to personally track for my family. Like my company tracks our carbon footprint because everyone has the carbon net zero goals. Was it 2030 or 2033?
Some of those are pushed out 2035, 2040, but the overall,
right,
the thought behind it is the same. No matter what time that you try to get it done, that you try to bring in, your sustainable initiatives and that carbon neutrality and all of that, the thought is the same.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting how wasteful we are. So sustainability, it is not just a fad. It is really to take care of our children, our grandchildren, and just going forward. So I believe it's super important. I'm glad, you and I seem to have the same values, not only with the sustainability, but just what is for our next generation. We talked about this last night. It's kind of off topic with KPIs, but this podcast is to teach the next generation, and you have bought in on that through all the things that you're doing. You've been involved with the student chapter of IFMA for 16 years, you said?
Not quite that. I'm not that old.
12 years? I wrote it down last night. 12, was it 12?
I graduated from UNC Charlotte in 2015, so coming up on 9 years. But I've been in IFMA for about 10 or 11 years. Started there with the student chapter.
Okay, that's where I'm getting the numbers. I'm adding them together.
But bridging that gap between the academics and the industry, I am only here because that path was paved for me.
Right.
My very first supervisor. Her and I grew a working relationship during my tenure at UNC Charlotte as the student chapter president. So when a position became available to work for her, she reached out directly to me. The network is absolutely one of the most important pieces of FM, but you also have to know what you're doing.
It's who you know, but you got to know.
Yes. Knowing who you know will get you there. What you know will keep you there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So kind of to wrap up the KPIs, how do you track KPIs? I know there's a variety of different ways, and it really depends on your time and your money, like what budget you have. And I was talking with someone else in facility management today. We were talking about a different topic, and I told her, I said, I want this to be cost effective, but I don't want it to take too much time. And she laughed at me and said, those two don't mix. You get one or the other, which is true. So I know I have had business intelligence tools in the past to help me. I've had reports on my work order management system, or right now I'm an Excel spreadsheet whiz, or I pretend to be. So how are you looking at tracking your KPIs as you're creating those?
As I mentioned, we are still at the foundational level. So right now it is going to be Excel based. It's going to be that spreadsheet based. I'm utilizing my CMMS. That's another acronym for us, computerized maintenance management software, to track all of, ultimately, what I would be looking at doing is instituting 3 KPIs to get us started. One of those would be equipment downtime or overall downtime, and that has to be 0. Really, in a school environment, that should be at 0. I can't send students home.
Right.
Another one would be the customer satisfaction, so that that's exactly what we're doing by pushing out this first survey to help us sort of create those SLAs and everything like that. We've got some defined, what a priority work order An
Mhm.
emergency work order is supposed to be answered within 1 day, right?
Right.
Completed in 1 day. And that was defined well before my time. I'm pretty sure that was just put in to our work order system, a foundational input for that
Absolutely.
work order system to set, start date to end date. So that's the second one would be the, how effective am I managing the customer satisfaction? What does that look like? And then a third would be my work order timeline. Those three would be my baby steps to get started into KPIs.
Mhm.
Of course, I can expand from that, right?
Yeah.
Starting small, starting targeted with intentionality will be the only way that I get this program successfully off the ground. And to be clear, I'm not being asked by my supervisors to create or establish these key performance indicators. I am
Yeah.
doing based on my experience from the corporate world and how to better manage the facilities here now that I'm acting as essentially property manager, facility manager, smushed into one. I own these two buildings. I don't lease any of my space. We can rent out some of our space, but I don't have tenants that lease out the space. My tenants
Are your
are
students? Yeah. Well, and like you said earlier, if you're not measuring it, you can't improve on something you're not measuring. I did write that down. Someone said that recently. I wrote it down, but that stuck with me just in life in general, but especially in facility management. You can't improve without measurements. So, I mean, KPIs, it is the foundation, I believe, in making sure that you are a well-oiled machine. You're providing the best services. And right now is the beginning of the year, still technically in quarter 1. And it's the perfect time to lay down that foundation for the year ahead. And that's why I wanted to start with KPIs with the first episode. Like that is your baseline for performance. So it's super important. And that is why we track them like a hawk as facility managers. Um, do
So
you,
I'm actually in my Q3 right now. So my
okay,
fiscal starts July 1.
right.
Now is the perfect time for me to be starting to set these foundations for moving forward. And hopefully I can do this in the 24-25 school year. But I did want to touch on, and we've touched on these. I did a quick Google search, 5 reasons why you need KPIs to monitor company health. We've touched upon that, to measure progress. Again, you cannot improve what you have not measured. To
Yeah.
make adjustments and stay on track, that's very much related to the previous one. To solve problems or tackle opportunities, that is related back over to, let's say, for instance, my equipment downtime. And then to
Yeah.
analyze patterns over time, which is something that we haven't necessarily touched on, is how KPIs can lead into capital planning and
Mhm.
budgeting for those larger type projects later on down the road.
Yes. Things just kind of some things for anyone to think of if they're starting out with tracking. Definitely make sure that you're looking at an SLA type one, making sure that you have uniform service provided. And I think SLAs are going to be the place to start with that. Tracking your budget. Those are great KPIs to look at. And then I kind of wrote out like your cost savings, cost avoidance, tracking those, tracking your assets for capital planning. You kind of hit on that. Tracking your sustainability, your customer service satisfaction ratings, if you have best practices. I wrote down tracking waste, which kind of goes back into that sustainability umbrella. But those are just some basic areas to start. And you touched on this, keeping it simple. You don't want to overwhelm yourself with 20 different metrics that you're looking at. Even in an established client area or on site, you still don't want to have 10 things that you're trying to measure yourself against. I
Exactly.
would keep it 5 buckets of things that you want at max, unless your stakeholders are calling out more. But 5, I think, is a really good healthy number of things to track and keep up with for KPIs. You agree?
I would totally agree with you. Some of the risks that are inherent with KPIs, you hit them on the head there. Too many indicators can be a distraction
Yes.
towards your overall goal, right? But also, another word of caution, KPIs need to be kept, their integrity needs to be kept intact. Meaning, if you fall behind on one of your KPIs, you cannot misrepresent that. Manipulation equals misalignment. And that can, if you are being true to monitoring progress, you can't sugarcoat the lack of progress to try to make your KPI look better.
True.
Because now you've created a division or a delta between where you're actually at versus where you think you are.
Yeah,
and
thank you for calling that out.
Another risk inherent with KPIs here, if you drive too much pressure to maintain your KPIs, that can also create stress or dissatisfaction among your team, who is ultimately responsible for enacting that work order, for making sure your SLA is met, for making sure your cost savings are met.
Yeah.
That can definitely create dissatisfaction and stress, which will be inevitably a negative thing as your team continues to try to meet this SLA or this KPI.
It's almost counterproductive.
It would be counter. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming and discussing KPIs. I know it's not a super fun topic or exciting. I'm a nerd, so I love KPIs. Like this gets me all excited. I'm a numbers person. I spit off numbers to people all the time. Like, hey, this is a percentage based on this. And they just, everyone just kind of looks at me like, okay, that's actually really great. Yeah, I mansplain numbers. But to wrap up this first episode, I love work order bloopers. They give me life. We have to laugh and have fun in our industry to survive sometimes. And I have some really good bloopers, but this one I did choose from Reddit recently. Fiery Forge put this one in, and I think you will equally find this one funny. They said, I once typed up a work order for a guy to run to Lowe's to get us a quote for a DeWalt tool set, the drill saw, etc., and to try and get a discount. I kept getting interrupted. I'd type a few words, phone would ring. Type a few words, crap, misspelled that, backspace. Someone walks in, try and focus on them, but also type. 2 emails come in, etc. And then, pausing right there, I swear that you can relate. This always happens to us when we are like trying to just get something done. Everything is
the reason no one's come in my door is because it's almost 7 p.m.
Right. I don't know if you can see on camera, but my daughter just walked in and I was like, get out. It's the life of, we're a facility manager. Of course, someone's going to interrupt us. But, back to the story, he says, I hurry up, I print it. The guy gets on the road. 30 minutes later, I get a very confused phone call and they're laughing. And I can even hear the Lowe's guys laughing in the background. Turns out I typed and try to get the disco instead of discount. Now, every single time someone picks up anything for me now, they always call and ask, and you guess it, if I want the disco. So, the misspellings and mistypes that we see in work orders from us and from other people, like, they're the best.
Yep. We are facility managers.
Yes.
Managers.
Spell. Well, thank you so much, Dallas. I appreciate your time, and we'll be back soon.
Sounds great. Thank you, Liz.
Bye.